Waeco camping fridge. You can run it on 12 volt or mains 220 volt. It's got this temperature controller with buttons on the top here, and this one, when it came in, if you switch it on, the temperature it displays was very different from real temperature. It was displaying about 50 degrees Celsius in 20 degree room temperature, and it would run and get cold, and when we get it down to about minus 15 inside the box, the display was showing about 12 or 13 degrees Celsius. So the temperature was very wrong, and I first thought it could be the sensor. It's got an electronic sensor, which is this sensor here, which I took out, and I tried it with a different sensor, but it was exactly the same. So my conclusion is that the temperature controller on the electronic board is faulty. Now this one's temperature controller is this electronic board here. Now this electronic board is a temperature controller. It's got a battery protection device in there, and it's got a voltage input protection device. It's got lots of features on it. But the sensor, which fits in that hole there, plugs directly onto, here's the rest of the wire of it, plugs directly into the board. So this board is responsible for displaying the correct temperature. Now, this board is faulty, and nowhere in South Africa can we get a board like this. So I told the customer what I can do is just put a different type of temperature controller in. We don't need all the features of battery protection and low voltage protection, just to control the temperature. So what I've done is, on the top here there's a sticker that you can peel off, and this is your display board. Now I've cut a hole in here. This is the piece of plastic that was there. I dug some foam out. Now this is where I'm going to mount the other controller. I'll just get it. This controller will just push into the hole here. Now this controller comes with its own sensor. So we need to connect this sensor up. So what I've done in the top, I drilled a little hole through. So from inside, I can stick this sensor through the hole. This controller will go in there. I'll push it in deeper, and there is a tube where these wires go down. So I'll stick the wires down and mount this sensor in the cabinet. And this sensor has got 4 connections. 2 of them is the power. So we'll just get 12 volt from the compressor, 12 volt to activate it, and then it's got a switch, normally open, normally close. And on this compressor, there is 2 contacts, which is quite far down at the bottom, which is a switch part which will work through this. This electronic display, I will put it back in its position. On this fridge, there's a little light bulb, a light inside. When you open the lid, the light comes on, and when you close it, the light goes off. Now that light works through, there's a little magnet in the door, and when you close it, it lines up with this little lead relay here, and that switches your light on and off. So I'm going to keep this board and that display in place just to make the light shine, but this will control the temperature. So I'm going to connect 4 more wires, bring them through the hole, run them down and connect it, and then this display will switch the temperature on and off, and they can set it for whatever they want. On this, you can select what the differential is, the period between switching on and off. You can make it 2 degrees, 4 degrees, whatever you want, and you can select what temperature you want it to switch off, and this will control the fridge instead of the original one. And the guy will save a lot of money, because you cannot buy this electronic board, and it's either replacing this fridge with a new one or having that board on. I'll show you once I've connected the wires. I've got this wire strip. It's got 4 wires on it, which will work here. There's 2 white ones and a black and a red. So what I'll do is I'll use the 2 white wires for the switch, to switch the compressor on and off, and the red and the black I'll use for the power. Now this is 12 volt, and on the contactor it says positive and negative, so the very end connection here is the positive. So we stick this little wire in the hole there, and we tighten the screw. This bottle is in my way. The screwdriver is a little bit too big. Okay, the red one is connected. Then we carry on to the black one, which is the next one, which will be the negative of the 12 volts. And the 2 end ones is your switch wire, so it doesn't matter which one goes where, because that will just be the switch part that switches the compressor on and off when it reaches the correct temperature. Looks good. 4 wires are connected. There's no loose bits coming out that can short. Make sure all my connections is tight. And then we'll take this wire, we stick it through the hole and let it come out where the sensor wire is. Okay, that's the new display mounted now. It's just a press fit, but once we've checked it and everything works fine, then I will put some glue on it so it's a permanent fixture. Now the wires has to go to the bottom. Now there's a little tube here from the factory where the wires go in. I just push it down the tube and it comes out at the bottom here. Okay, that's your sensor wire. Now the sensor plugs into this hole here. But what I'll do is I'll run it behind the compressor. I'll do that later. And this is the 4 extra wires for making the new controller work, which I'll stick down the hole. Just measuring, the hole is about, well, it's that length. So we just make sure we get the sensor all the way to the bottom of the hole. Once it's in, I'll just help it with this welding rod to make sure it's at the bottom, and there's some gluey plastic stuff that closes the hole up. So that is the sensor mounted. There's a little hole there. It gets a little saddle that holds the wire in place. Now I must just go find that saddle. It screws on with a little screw there. And these 4 wires I'll connect. Now your compressor, this compressor has got a 220 in or a 12 in, so it's 12 and 220 volts. And get the second one on. Okay, there's the second saddle. All it does is holds this wire. Now I've just got to find terminals, and I've got to figure out which ones of these will give me 12 volt. So I'm going to put the fridge down, I'm going to switch it on, power it up, let it run with an old temperature controller just to figure out what the 12 volt is. I've plugged this fridge on now. The display shows an error because the sensor is not connected. Now I've put my fluke tester on it, and I found that the yellow and brown wires here give off 12 volt permanently, whether the compressor runs or not. So those are the wires that I'm going to connect my black and red to, positive and negative. And this little bridge piece, I've put it on contact C, and I'm just for testing purposes got the bridge at the bottom, which is contact number T, and then the compressor starts up and runs, and our voltage stays on 11.84, which is close enough to 12 volt. And if we break this contact, the compressor and the fan stops, and we're still getting our 11.84 volts. So I'm going to connect the power for this controller onto this brown and yellow wire, and the 2 white wires goes on there. I'm just going to connect that and we'll see how it works. Okay, so now I'm going to connect the wire. So we'll start off with the top one here, which is the brown wire, which is the positive. Oh shit, I pulled another one out by accident, which is the black one. Put it back. Okay, here's the brown wire, which is the positive. Now there's a little skirt over it. We'll use the same skirt again. Then I cut this terminal off, and I peel this wire, and we take the red one from here, which goes behind this beam, and we stick it into the skirt as well. Then we peel this red wire to expose the terminals. We wind the two together, and I'll put a new terminal onto it. So I'll put the terminal there, and the way I do it, I use this pliers. And we crimp it in like that. And then there's a second crimp that goes around the copper wire part of it. Which we just push together like that. And crimp it in like that. Push the two together. And then we have the terminal on like that. And the back is crimped, and then we slide the same little skirt back on over the terminal, and we plug it back into the connection where we got it out of, which was just below the black one. Okay, that's back. Now we're going to do the second one, which I marked with this, but it fell out. Now I'm not sure which the second one was. So I'll have to redo my test again, because I knew that was the positive. So let's put this in here. And the negative. Let's switch the tester on. It's obviously not that one. It's not that one. It's not that one. Okay, wait, there we go. It's on the green one just below it. 11.8, put my bridge on, compressor runs. Okay, so the second one is the green wire. So the green wire we pull out. Okay, as I pulled, the whole wire broke off the terminal, but we're going to put a new terminal on anyway. So we use the same sleeve with our green wire. We put the sleeve on. Not a sleeve, it's a skirt, sorry. We peel the end of the wire to expose the live wires, like that. And then we take the black wire from this, we go behind this pillar, stick this into stick it into the skirt, peel it, and we turn these two wires together, and we put another one of these terminals on, which is this terminal here. And I'll crimp it the same way as I did the last one. And we crimp the bottom of it. There, our terminal is on. We slide this little skirt back onto it. Plug it in. Now, if I plug it in now, there should be power on my display and it should light up. It lights up. It shows 19 degrees. That's our temperature. And it's set on 28, but we're not worried about the settings now. I'm going to connect these two wires, which is the switched wires. I'm going to connect them onto the compressor. So I'm going to have to get two more lugs. Skirts of these two wires, because I'm going to leave them unplugged and the skirts protect them from shorting out. So we put two new skirts on. I slide the skirt on. And this is the wires for the switch part of my temperature controller. Okay, the one is done. We slide it into the skirt. And the second one, first put the skirt on. We put the second terminal in. Wires from the controller, which we plug on number contact T and C, which is on these compressors, the contacts that make the compressor go on and off. And that's the very bottom one. So these two wires are loose. So we plug it in, we get 12 volt, the display works. Now I've read through this. It's got a whole list of adjustments you can do, but basically number 19.7 is our temperature now, and that's the temperature it must switch off at, which is higher. So we're going to set this down to, let's take it down to close to 0 degrees. So I just hold this in, this temperature goes down. Okay, that's 0 degrees. If we go any colder, we go to negative. So let's leave it on 0. It will flash for a while. In the meantime, the compressor did start up. Its compressor is running at the moment. So now it's running on this controller. Temperature is 19.7. When it gets to 0, the contactor will break contacts. The two white wires, which is T and C. The red and black wire up here gives permanent 12 volt to this. So we've got both the electronic boards is running, but this one here shows a red light because there's an error, and it shows error. But I'm keeping it. Inside is a little light. You want to see the light? There's this little light shining, and when you close the lid, the light stops. So the only reason why I keep this board and everything is for the light. I will dismantle these little lights so that this will just be dull and the temperature gets set on here. So I'm going to leave it to run, go down to 0 and see how it switches off. When I switch it on, this little red light shines. So I'm just taking the light bulb out. Now notice it's soldered onto the PC board there. So all I'm going to do is just heat it up and pull it out there. I don't know if my soldering iron is warm yet. Okay, there's the little red light. That's out now. So while I'm busy, I might as well take that light out as well, because none of these lights have any function now, and if a light comes on, the customer might bring it back and say, these lights are shining. So I just heat the little LEDs solder up and pull the light bulb out. There's the other light, and this is your display that flashes the error. So we can do the same thing. It's a little bit tricky to solder there, so I'm rather, instead of soldering, because it's very close to this here, I might damage something, I'll just cut those terminals off. So let me get a scissors. A lot of them exposed here, so we just chop them off. There's two on this side, two on this side. So let's just see if it wants any lights to shine. Okay, it shows some of the error. So I'll chop some more off. No, I'm going to have to solder the end ones off. Got to wait for my soldering iron to warm up again. I'll just be very careful not to damage the circuitry here. So I've taken the whole little display out now. So there's no display on here, so nothing can light up. So let's just test our fridge. Plug it in, our display comes on, still set on 0. Compressor comes on. And the whole reason for this board is to see that the light works. So let's see if the light does work. There's our little light working, and when we close the lid, light goes off. Okay, so this little board, I'm just going to mount it back on its bracket, put it back in there, but none of the lights will work ever again. So this was on with 3 little self-tapping screws in the plastic. This fits in there, and it's got 2 screws that holds it in position. They are little stainless steel countersunk. While we were doing all this, the fridge has already dropped down to 10 degrees. So it's 10 degrees lower than we started. I can't remember what we started it on, but it's on 10.5. As it gets colder, there's 10.4 temperature drops. So now I'm going to put the sticker back on there. if the existing glue is not strong enough to hold it, I will just use some contact glue on it. Okay. So you still got the on-off switch here and your set buttons and that, which is still connected. So my guess is if you push and hold this on-off switch, you might switch the light off inside, but otherwise this doesn't do anything. I'm going to run it for a while, and then all we do is we put this in, we put the cover on, and the fridge will work like before. It's just, instead of adjusting temperature here, you do it there. This fridge has been running for about an hour and a half now. It's still set on 0. So it cycles on 0, the compressor switch is off, but it goes about 0.8 to 0.9 of a degree colder, and then the temperature rises again. It goes to about 2 degrees and switch on and off. So I think this temperature controller works fine. This fridge, I ran it on a 220 volt cable, but I've got a 12 volt power supply, so I've been running it on both and it works fine. So I think this fridge is fine. So we can put it together, put all these covers together. So first I'll switch the fridge off, and then we unplug the plugs. This is the 12 volt and the 220 volt plug plugs in there. I turn this fridge up like that so we can reach everything. So I don't have a screwdriver. So this cover here is a cover that covers this electronic board. So the electronic board is still active, so we put that cover back. Okay, so the new wires I put in is this one here. It's not going to touch anything. That sensor wire runs behind there. These are the 2 wires that we unplugged from the electronic board. If we're scared that they might short against something, we can tie them up with a zip tie somewhere, and I think that's what I'll do. Let me just get a tie. You just tie them up there, and then I cut the ends of the cable tie off, so they're not going to interfere with anything. This has got its 2 little saddles, so that's fine. So we put this together. It just slides in there. Your 2 feet stick out, and there's a whole lot of screws that holds this together. So they just screw into plastic, so you don't want to make them too tight, otherwise they just strip in the plastic. And there's a couple of screws on this side. Okay, so that's the fridge together. This controller is such a tight fit, I'm not even going to put glue on. It fits there. I'll just give it a nice clean before we send it out. And the power cord plugs in here. We switch it on, shows the temperature 0.5, so it's a half a degree above zero. It's set to maintain zero. None of these things work. And that's how I put these electronic controllers into these Waeco fridges.